Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee and our online worship service this morning. I'm Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom, and I'm honored to serve as the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's senior minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all you're bringing with you today and all your heart longs to set down. We'd like to pay a special welcome to our guests this morning, in particular, the First Unitarian Universalist congregation of Ann Arbor, who's joining us from Michigan this morning. We here at First Unitarian in Milwaukee had the honor of having Ann Arbor's senior minister, the Reverend Manish Mishra Marzetti, as our pulpit guest this past fall. So it's a real delight to welcome the congregation Reverend Manish Mishra Marzetti serves to join us this morning for our worship service. Reverend Manish and I are longtime collaborators and friends and the co-editors of the book Justice on Earth. So Ann Arbor folks, I see you've been saying hello in our chat so far, and anyone else who's joining us from afar today, if you haven't said hello already, why don't you go and tell us where you're joining us from and say hello in our chat on YouTube. I'd like to welcome everyone into our worship service this morning by inviting you to repeat our First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Our opening words this morning are the poem, "The Thing Is," by Ellen Bass. The thing is to love life, even when you have no stomach for it, and everything you've held dear crumbles like burnt paper in your hands, your throat filled with the silt of it. When grief sits with you, its tropical heat thickening the air, heavy as water, more fit for gills than lungs. When grief weights down like your own flesh, only more of it, an obesity of grief, and you think, how can a body withstand this? Then you hold life like a face between your palms, a plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes, and you say, yes, yes, I will take you. I will love you again. Let's go now to our beloved First Church sanctuary to light the chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism.
Hi, my name is Laurie Baker, and these are my sons, Max and Charlie. We have been coming to First Church since Max was a baby in the nursery. You may not know me because I spent many years coming to church and sitting quietly in the balcony, soaking up the music, the message, and feeding my soul. As a classic introvert, you're unlikely to find me at coffee hour. But I have given steadily to the church for all my years of attendance because I believe in the mission and spirit of this place. Some people love being part of this church because it gives them a spiritual home, a place in which to explore many different religions and ideas. Others love being part of this community and value the relationships made and deepened here. For me, it's being part of something bigger than myself, a group of people committed, as I am, to social justice and to being part of the Milwaukee community, to looking outside myself to the wider world and finding ways to make it better. By giving to First Church, I'm saying that this beloved community and our collective work in our wider community matters to me. We can do more together than we can apart. By combining our gifts and our talents, we can reach more people and do more good in the world than we could giving by ourselves. The church reminds me in both subtle and not so subtle ways to be a better person, to get out of my head and into the world. This has been a dark time for us all. Innocent people gunned down in the street for the sin of being Black, social unrest, an attempted coup, a life-threatening virus completely uncontrolled by our government in one of the wealthiest countries on earth. But giving of ourselves, our money, our time, our talents, can remind us that there is light in the darkness, that there is good in the world and in ourselves, and that there are people who need us, individually and collectively, to show up. Another thing I love about First Church is the children's religious education program. In RE, Max and Charlie have learned firsthand these values that matter to us. Whether it's cleaning up a local park on a spring Sunday morning or making sandwiches to donate to the homeless, our RE program is committed to inspiring action in line with the values of our beloved community.
As my mom said, the RE program here has really helped me better myself as a person. From studying the many wonderful religions of the world and crossing paths to assembling art supply bags for at-risk kids, I've learned so much about the world outside of myself, and I am taught each and every week to care about issues that matter. Just last year, like before COVID, I got to participate in an anti-authoritarian protest with many other First Church members when a national figure came to speak in Milwaukee. It was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had because I was surrounded by lots of people who believe the same thing as me and who work together to make a change, even when it seems impossible. I think this is one of the main messages of this church. You can do anything you want to do, no matter how hard it seems, if you just stand up for yourself and what you believe. And I would like to thank First Church for teaching me this, as it will help me out a great deal in my life.
I know that it's hard for you youths to ask for money, but I am asking you now. Picture yourself sitting back in the sanctuary again, whether it's on the main floor or up in the quiet cocoon of the balcony with me. Think about what First Church means to you, and then think about what First Church means for our wider community, for Milwaukee, for Wisconsin, for the planet. Then consider your finances and think about how much you can afford to give. Make the future of First Church a priority. Can you give more than last year? Can you start pledging this year? Please join me in pledging your money and talents to First Church so that our beloved community can continue to grow and thrive, making a significant impact on our wider community for years and generations to come.
Thank you.
Doing that Spirit says do. You got to do, and that Spirit says do. Doing that Spirit says do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you've got to do, oh Lord. You got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 You got to sing
Oh, thank you so much, Lori and Max and Charlie, for sharing that testimonial with us. Your story was inspiring to me, certainly. And to all the members who have submitted their pledges already, it was great to see your faces on this Sunday morning. I miss you so much. My dear ones, because of the unprecedented times in which we're living, and the ways our lives are all being touched by the grief and the loss of this global coronavirus pandemic, we're continuing our pandemic practice of lighting the COVID candle for any of our members who've had a loved one die during this period, either from COVID or from another cause. If you've had a loved one die from coronavirus or another cause during this time, and you'd like the COVID candle lit for them during Sunday worship, contact one of the ministers. Brian Hilgeman's grandmother, Wilma Sanders Hilgeman, passed away peacefully on January 14th, 2021 in Greenwood, Indiana, at the age of 95 after a long, full, generous, and loving life. It is our pandemic practice to light our COVID candle, to honor the lives and the deaths of members' loved ones during the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we light our COVID candle in honor of Brian Hilgeman's grandmother, Wilma Sanders Hilgeman. As we enter now into a time of meditation, which will be followed by silence, followed by the song Spirit of Life, I just invite you, wherever you are, to take a moment to get yourself comfortable in your body, whatever that means to you. That might mean taking a deep breath and feeling the air fill your lungs, moving in and out, bringing you into being here and now. Or it might mean feeling your feet touching the ground, grounding you in the steady, strong earth beneath you. Or it might mean feeling the very tip top of your head, that crown, connect you with all that is. Whatever it means to you, do it now. Get comfortable in your body and center. Spirit of life and love, Holy One, of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Help us connect with the love in our hearts and bring it out into the community. Help us know how to love one another well, how to be in right relationship. When we are tired, when the world is too much, when the suffering is too much, may we feel a greater love surrounding us and all that is. May we feel it holding us. And may this larger love move through us, through the work of our heads and hearts and hands, so that we may become the beloving community. May it be so, and amen.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Piercy. I am happy to be the worship associate this morning and to have the opportunity to recall an experience about a beloved community. I will be in the coffee hour following service to say hello. The sweat dripped off of me. It was over 100 degrees even though it was after midnight. I was in a small room with a glassless window that opened into the African village. It was my first night. Every sound outside was a lion, even though there are no lions in Sierra Leone. I dripped and slept fitfully until in the pre-dawn I was gently nudged to waking by the Muslim call to prayer from a nearby mud hut mosque. Over a breakfast of boiled egg, pineapple, and instant coffee, Reverend Deek came by with a chicken for our daily stew and offered a morning prayer. We attended our first village-wide meeting that began as they always do with a Muslim prayer blessing, followed by the Lord's Prayer. All villagers prayed both. The village chief came to sit outside our building, and a stream of villagers came by to argue over disputes, ask for his wisdom, and in some cases a decision. Later, after lunch, Deek's chicken, I sat and talked with B, one of the women who was assigned to help me do my work in the village. I asked about the community, the coexistence of Muslims and Christians, the village process of problem solving. It was not always like that, she said, only since the war. The civil war raged through Sierra Leone for over 10 years. This village was destroyed. People lived in the bush. Children were conscripted to fight with either the government or the rebels. Children from this village, I asked? Yes, they're still here. One of them killed my uncle, right there. She pointed to a dusty area a few yards from where we sat. He shot him in the head because he did not like what the food he was given. She pointed to a hut 20 yards away and said he lives over there. Astonished, I asked, how do you handle that? Well, I forgave him. After a long pause, she said, what choice did I have? Later, I asked Sam Cormoy, my host and founder of the organization I was working with in the village, about the community. Well, when we got here, a year after the Civil War, there were people, but there was no real community, Sam said. There was the village chief by heredity, but no real structure. Everyone was listless, looking out only for themselves, employing survival skills they had learned in the war. The government had instituted a reconciliation policy, but it was ineffective. Hatred, devastating poverty, and violence had reduced people to their basest survival instincts. Sam recalled that in the early days of being in the village, that he would hold village-wide meetings each day to talk about the condition of the people in the village. Sam said that finally, after almost a week of meetings, one man in the corner stood up and pointed across the area to another man and loudly said, "You killed my brother with a machete. I saw you." And after a long pause, he said, "And now I forgive you." Sam said this led to days of meetings where villagers recounted their stories of hatred and forgiveness. It is out of that we were able to begin to build a village based on respect, forgiveness, and cooperation. It is not always perfect. There are still bad people in this village. There is still poverty. There is still hunger and bad times. But we are building our community. He paused in thought. Then he turned to me and he smiled and he said, "What choice did we have?"
This is a song that you all have probably sung, you all know, but what you may not know is that this song is a Gullah spiritual from the Gullah South Sea Islands of the United States. A lot of people don't even know that there are islands around there. They're down there around South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And this is a song that comes, a lot of people don't know that it's from the Sea Island people. They have their own language, And they were able, out of necessity, they created a language so that they could speak with each other, because these people were stolen from around Sierra Leone, many different dialects and languages, and what they understood was that they needed to create a common language so that they could share each other's stories and history. And the thing is that when somebody else knows your story, when you have those times when you just do not feel like yourself and you can't feel your own roots, if somebody else knows your story, they can remind you. They can remind you of who you are. So we create common languages, which singing and music is a common language that we sing. So this song, really, after the lynching of George Floyd, this song just meant so much to me, even though I've known it for my whole life. And it's that lone person asking to be seen in a world and in a time that doesn't see them as a human being. And a lot of my people, listen, I'm walking around in this beautiful black skin, and right now it's a little scarier than it has been for a long time. But what I know, and I'm looking at all of you, I cannot survive without you. We need each other. Things will not change without each other. Nod your head. Nod it. Thank you. So we're going to sing this song, but the one thing you're going to do for me is you're going to make me a pledge. Please let us raise our right hands. You must promise me that you will never, ever, 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 ever use the phrase a kumbaya moment. It has nothing to do with the song. Thank you. Harmonies are absolutely imperative. I'll start out with an introduction and then we'll all come in together. All around our wounded planet, folks are on their knees, looking to their gods and asking, can you help us please? How do we get so far away from the love you gave? What happened to the light and love? Hear us as we pray. Come by here, my Lord, come by here, come by here, my Lord, come by here, come by here, my Lord, come by here. Oh, Lord, come by here, 'cause we are crying, Lord, come by here. We are crying, my Lord, come by here. We are crying, my Lord, come by here. Oh, Lord, come by here. We are suffering, Lord, come by here. We are suffering, Lord, please come by here. We are suffering, my Lord, come by here. our babies, Lord, come by here. For our babies, Lord, come by here. Oh, Lord, come by here. For all people, Lord, come by here. For all people, my Lord, please come by here. For all people, Lord, come by here. Oh, Lord, come by here. Come by here, my Lord, come by here. Come by here, my Lord, come by here. Come by here, my Lord, come by here. Oh, Lord, come by here. Oh, Lord, come by here. Oh, Lord, come by here.
Thank you to Melanie DeMore for that incredibly powerful rendition of Come By Here. Come by here, my Lord. Come by here. That spiritual was developed by the Gullah Geechee people during their experience of slavery and the traumatic oppression that it contains along the South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida coastlines. It's a song where the spirit cries out for companionship and connection in the midst of suffering. The first known recording of that song was made in 1926 in the coastal town of Darien, Georgia, by a Gullah Geechee man named H. Wiley in the archive of the American folk song stored in the Library of Congress. The song asks God to come by here. Sweet Honey in the Rocks, Issei Barnwell calls it a demand for God to come by here when someone's singing, when someone's crying, when someone's suffering. Lord, come by here. In process theology, God is never absent, never abandons suffering human beings or joyful ones. God is present in all that is. God is part of all that is with us in moments of cruelty and harm, moments of joy and celebration, moments of numbness and dissociation. God is part of all that is, co-suffering and co-celebrating with us and all beings through all life. When someone cries out to God, process theology says, God is already there. One of the most difficult, most painful questions in human reckoning is the question of evil. In theology, This conundrum is called Theodicy, or the paradox of how a loving God could be reconciled with the ravages of human suffering. It asks, where is God in genocide? Where is God in mass starvation? Where is God in a global pandemic that has killed more than 2.5 million people worldwide at this point, including more than 500,000 American lives? For some folks, this question has only one answer. There is no God. Or if there is a God, then that God is a jerk. The Reverend Carol McIntyre, senior pastor at the First Baptist Church in Columbia, Missouri, writes the searing story of her own wrestling with suffering and theodicy in her February 19th, 2021 article entitled Raging at God After My 67-Year-Old Father Died of COVID. Reverend McIntyre writes, my dad was a vibrant and healthy 67-year-old when he caught COVID-19 and died a few weeks before Christmas. I was left heartbroken and enraged. I was angry at this seemingly never-ending pandemic and honestly at God for creating such a broken world. For days after my dad died, as a way of praying my pain, I imagined myself standing outside the gates of heaven, hurling insults and rocks at the divine. Day after day, I kept showing up at the gates, heaving accusations and a flood of obscenities at God. Perhaps I was trying to provoke God. I wanted the gates to open up and for the divine to step out and give me some kind of explanation. She writes, my theology does not embrace the idea that God caused my father to die. Yet I am hard-pressed to understand why. Why God would allow a world where a virus can, within months, destroy the lives of so many people. What the hell, God? Do you not care for us? So many tears and so much grief. What is wrong with you, God? Do you delight in seeing us suffer? For process theologians, the answer to Theodicy's question, how can God be both all-loving and all-powerful in a world beset by cruelty and tragedy, is God is not all-powerful. In process theology, God's power in the world is collaborative, not controlling. God acts only by invitation and never makes things happen. Human beings make choices to respond to the invitation to love and harmony, or to choose to ignore that invitation and go their own route. Process theologian Marjorie Suchocki defines sin. I know that can be a hard word for some Unitarian Universalists, but Marjorie Suchocki defines sin as the violence of rebellion against creation. According to fellow process theologian Catherine Keller, Suchocki is, quote, arguing against the focus on sin as a rebellion against God because it removes our focus from our responsibility to each other. Suchocki is arguing that causing harm to one another is the real sin, and that harming one another is what hurts God. Keller uses the following metaphor to illustrate when she writes, imagine a squabble breaks out in the kindergarten. A bully has hurt a smaller child, and all the kinder get into an uproar, throwing things and screaming and kicking and biting. What is the good kindergarten teacher concerned about? Is she really concerned about the kids hurting her? Keller and Suhaki believe that what matters in this life is not our human resistance to some abstract or arbitrary rules. Rather, what matters is that human beings do not enact violence against one another, or against non-human beings, or against the earth. In process theology, it is the harm we cause to each other and the world that grieves God, not the harms we might imagine we would cause to God. Reverend McIntyre continues sharing her own grief process. One day, when my grief was particularly heavy, I brought a battering ram along on my trip to heaven's gates and attempted to break them down and hold God to account. As I pounded away at those gates unexpectedly, an image of God, heartbroken and furious, came to my mind. Then this uneasy truth washed over me. It's easier to blame God than to admit that we have failed one another. Unitarian Universalist humanism confronts the ways that we harm one another by removing God from the equation entirely and putting the onus squarely on us as humans. In a humanist theological framework, we are fundamentally responsible to one another and for one another in this world. The 1933 Humanist Manifesto declared that, quote, the goal of humanism is a free and universal society in which people voluntarily and intelligently cooperate for the common good. Humanists demand a shared life in a shared world, and humanism endeavors to establish the conditions of a satisfactory life for all, not merely for the few. Here at First Church, we have been talking about beloved community all month this February, which begs the question, beloved to whom? For the theologians who developed this theological term, part of the answer to that question was beloved to God, building on the universalist concept that all human beings are universally beloved to God. Our universalist theological tradition developed from people who believed that God's love was so big that any finite human error paled in comparison. In universalism, God's love and wisdom and mercy are infinite, which is just so much bigger than the mistakes a human might make in one finite life. For universalists, God does not require human behavior or obedience for God's sake. We need not beg or perform for God's mercy or love. It is freely given and infinite. Rather, our work is for each other and for ourselves. Universalist theology posits that God's infinite love allows us to focus on living and loving one another well. In 21st century Unitarian Universalist communities, we have a variety of beliefs about God, but a shared commitment to love one another well. There are a number of foundational theological threads interwoven together in our Unitarian Universalist tradition. They make up the tapestry of who we are as a faith. Regardless of whether there is an active or a passive or no God or multiple gods, Unitarian Universalism has a shared sense of responsibility for human behavior, for our human role in building the beloved community. Indeed, studies have shown that theists and atheists and agnostics alike have the same level of morality when it comes to fairness and protecting the well-being of vulnerable people, when it comes to supporting liberty and opposing oppression. We are all here together now, bound up with one another in inextricable mutuality. We are responsible to and for one another. In order to become the beloved community, to build a village based on cooperation and mutual respect, one in which work for the common good and creation of the condition in which we work for the common good and we create the conditions to meet the needs of all people, not just a few. In order to do all that, we must be beloving community. Active verb, doing the good and hard work of loving one another well. This pandemic has hammered home the lesson that we belong to one another, that we are inextricably linked with one another in the fabric of all existence. There is no escape from the virus for some, but not for all. There is no protecting oneself without protecting the community. We have learned that we breathe one another's breath. We inhale and exhale the reality of our fundamental and inextricable interconnection. A couple of things are happening simultaneously here in Wisconsin this week. Gloriously, and with all celebration and gratitude and praise, the weather has let up. Oh, the deep freeze has given way to more moderate temperatures, and I see my neighbors outside smiling and walking and talking to one another in the sun. I don't know what's happening over there for you in Michigan, but I truly hope that you are getting some relief from winter as well. People are also starting to get vaccinated. A number of our First Church members who are over 65 have already been vaccinated, as well as healthcare personnel and others in Wisconsin's 1A grouping of vaccination. Hope. That tiny, feathery thing with wings is fluttering on the air as birds sing in the morning. Simultaneously, there is a COVID wall of exhaustion happening, made worse by the mid-February deep freeze we experienced and the prospect of looking forward to more months of pandemic. Even if we can see the light, folks at the end of the vaccine line especially still have a lot of tunnel to go, and it's already been such a long way so far. Unitarian Universalist minister Reverend Erica Hewitt put it this way: if we're in a 1,500 meter race, this is the third lap. Reverend Hewitt writes, quote, "The 1,500 meter race requires 4 laps around the track. It's considered a hard race, not just physically, but also mentally. The first lap isn't bad because you're full of adrenaline and everyone's racing like crazy. The second lap is harder, but you still have some energy. You're still excited to be racing. You might be keeping up well. Skipping ahead, the fourth lap of the race is grueling, but you're almost done. The finish line is coming. You want to win, so everyone flat out races with everything they've got, no holding back. So let's talk about the third lap. It's absolutely the hardest. A lot of track athletes say that you win or you lose the race in the third lap. You've been racing for a long time, but you're not that close to the end. You can't let up. You can't relax. Everyone is tired. You're tired. As Reverend Hewitt says, in this collective trauma experience of the pandemic, we are in the third lap. We're in the third lap as a society, and folks who are at the end of the vaccine line might especially be feeling that third lap experience. It's hard to be beloving community in the third lap of a prolonged collective trauma. It's hard to love anything, let alone love each other well. We are tired, we're frustrated, and we are over it. But we are not done. This pandemic, which has revealed so many long-standing fissures in our society, will be with us for at least a few more months. Right now, we need to remember all we have learned in our lifetimes about how to care for ourselves and our souls and one another well. Our values don't change when we're tired or frustrated or angry, but our capacity to implement them is affected when our resources are drained. So pay attention to your energy and to your spirit when you find your irritation rising at your partner or your parents or the dishes or that email. Remember that your body and your soul are doing a lot of work right now just to keep going. And then try to give yourself and others around you a little grace for the effort and exhaustion of this third lap. And as always, don't skimp on your spiritual practice. I know you're tired, I'm tired too, and it seems like something's gotta go, but don't choose the spiritual practice because that's what grounds you in your values, in how you want to be and who you want to be in this world. The transcendentalist Unitarian minister Theodore Parker wrote, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but a little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see there, I am sure it bends towards justice." It's likely that this quote inspired the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King to say that though, quote, "the arc of the universe is long, it bends towards justice." This fine theological thread of our tradition is hope woven through struggle, hope woven through the dark night of the soul, through grief and despair. It is the story that no matter how hopeless and painful it is now, we will end up together in justice, in love, in the beloved community. That theological thread of hope may or may not include God. For some, it's simply an evolutionary process moving towards increasing complexity and integration and harmony in which life is favored. For others, there's a loving God moving through the process, inviting the world along towards life and beauty and beloved community. Regardless, we human beings are here, and we are responsible for one another, for shining our love on each other, for lifting each other up, and for loving each other well. We must be beloving community for one another, even when it's hard. What other choice do we have? Amen, and may it be so.
Hello, you family. I'm going to sing a song with you called Shine on Me. It's an amazing spiritual that anybody can sing. And in these days when the things that we're dealing with, the feeling separate and all of that, and things seem so hard, this is one of those songs that you just throw your head back, put it in your medicine kit. All you have to do is ask. And here's how it goes. Shine on me, oh shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me, oh shine on me, yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Lift me up, oh, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up, oh, lift me up, yes, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up, oh, hold me close, yes, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse hold me close, yes, hold me close, oh, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse, please, hold me close. Oh, shine on me, yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me, oh, shine on me, yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. All you have to do is just ask. The light is always there. Always. Always. Love you.
Thank you again to Melanie Demore for the beautiful gift of your music. We are so grateful and we love you too. And thank you all for your generosity. As you know, pledges are at the core of our congregation's spiritual practice of generosity. We're also grateful for additional gifts to support our ministry and thank the folks out there who are appreciating this online ministry and supporting it by texting 73256 with the message "Give to you," or who are giving on our website. Your gifts help us continue to provide this ministry. We also share the plate with an organization every month. Star King School for the Ministry is our February Share the Plate recipient. Operating as a school for the ministry since 1904, Star King's mission is to educate people for Unitarian Universalist ministry and for progressive religious leadership in society. By investing in Unitarian Universalist theological education, we support students who minister within our tradition and beyond. We also help sustain RUU institutions that serve both as repositories for RUU traditions and as incubators for our future as a faith. To give a donation directly to Star King School, please visit sksm.edu/about/giving. You can see all these options on your screen now, and they'll also live on in the YouTube comment section of this video after worship is over. So thank you so much for giving, either right now or when you come back later. Your support keeps us and our community partners going. We thank you. Our closing words this morning are the poem "The World Has Need of You" by Ellen Bass. The world has need of you. Rilke said, "Everything here seems to need us." I can hardly imagine it as I walk to the lighthouse, feeling the ancient prayer of my arms swinging in counterpoint to my feet. Here I am, suspended between the sidewalk and the twilight, the sky dimming so fast it seems alive. What if you felt the invisible tug between you and everything? A boy on a bicycle rides by, his white shirt open, flaring behind him like wings. It's a hard time to be human. We know too much and too little. Does the breeze need us? The cliffs? The gulls? If you've managed to do one good thing, the ocean doesn't care. But when Newton's apple fell toward the earth ever so slightly fell toward the apple as well. Amen, and may it be so.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah.